66th chapter of Isaiah, 10th verse. Isaiah 66:10. We may finish Isaiah today. I said we may finish Isaiah today. Ned, would you word a prayer for us as we start?
Dear most loving Heavenly Father, Lord, we're so thankful for Thee to give us this opportunity today to come and have fellowship one with another. We pray, Lord, that you'll be with us through the service, that all things we do would be pleasing in Thy sight. We pray, Lord, that the meeting here today, we would have them named You, that given the opportunity, they might do that. Be with Tim as he breaks the word to us this morning, brings us a message. Be with all our teachers this morning in classes that we can learn what they prepared and apply it to our lives. Pray, Lord, you'll help us to be better Christians today than we were yesterday, to let our light shine. Forgive us of our sins, and never sin off in the false word like glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. As we've studied Isaiah for the last several months, maybe years, probably you have some, you can relate to some of the situations that Isaiah talks about, because that social order that Isaiah was in maybe was quite like the social order that we are in today. They had people that were religious after the law of Moses, after the order of the law of Moses, so to speak, but they didn't stick to the law of Moses. They were just generally religious as Jews. Do you suppose they had people in that society or in that era where some did not believe in God? I mean, why would the psalmists talk about the fool being one who would say no God? You know, we have a parallel situation today where we have people that are supposedly Bible believers, but then they really don't believe Scripture. As I am prone to receive, and I mentioned at different times, I get a basket full of mail every day from every group. I think somebody sold my address to 1,000 different people. One of my latest, I don't know whether somebody thought I needed this, but I got a mailing from the American Humanist Association. The American Humanist Association. And they have kind of a mantra, kind of a byline: good without a God. It's right in their material. Good without a God. Now, they are saying in this literature, well, first of all, this isn't just some isolated mailing. They have, according to their information, they have 220 chapters and affiliates across the United States. These people are evangelistic in terms of their belief system. They have chaplains. Imagine that. Chaplains. And they take the position that religious people who don't believe, or who believe that there's a problem with same-sex marriage, are actually bad people, evil people. They're not good. They say that people that are opposed to killing babies are not good people. If one is opposed to abortion, according to their belief system, they're not good people. And so they're promoting this idea that, if you're human, if you're a humanist, you have a superior lifestyle to religious people. Now, so we in America have some of the same situations, belief systems that Isaiah was confronted with. And not only are these people, not only are they promoting their doctrine, they are aggressively opposing religion, aggressively opposing religion of any kind. So, there are parallels between the American culture and the Israeli culture at the time of Isaiah, and particularly some of these problems, some things that we consider problems in America are escalating exponentially, very, very quickly. Well, in the last chapter of Isaiah, the writer Isaiah, he deals with the destruction of the Jewish nation. He deals with the captivity. He deals with reaching all the way down to the birth of Christ. He talks about the establishment of Christianity. He talks about the call of the Gentiles, which was a foreign idea to the typical Jew of Isaiah's time. He talks about, and he, I think, hints at the destruction of Jerusalem. And he also deals with the final judgment. And these themes are kind of interspaced, or interspersed rather, in the narrative here. In verse 10 beginning, he says, "Rejoice ye with Jerusalem." Now, in the next few verses, he's going to talk about the glorious nature of this new system, this new covenant, this thing we call Christianity. "Behold, rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be glad with her. All ye that love her, rejoice for the joy with her. All ye that mourn for her." Now, in describing this new era, the new covenant, the new regime, he portrays this as a loving family situation. He portrays it as an exuberant family situation, the kind of family that ought to be. He says in verse 11, "That ye may suck and be satisfied with the breast of her consolations." This is language that the Jews would have understood in terms of something that's going to be really great, that's going to be magnificent. All ye that, continuing verse 10, "All ye that love her, rejoice for joy with her, and all ye that mourn for her, that ye may suck and be satisfied with the breast of her consolations, that ye may milk out and be delighted with the abundance of her glory." He's describing just a wonderful narrative here, a narrative that probably many members of the church, and certainly the bulk of the so-called Christianity, doesn't appreciate. I mean, who appreciates the church, the system of Christianity? Who appreciates it to the extent that it's being described here? I mean, who appreciates it? You know, that we need to ask ourselves, do we really appreciate the awesomeness of the Christian system? Verse 12, for thus saith the Lord, behold, I will extend peace to her like a river. Now, think of that kind of poetic language. A river that's flowing and peaceful. The Jews would have identified with that. There's a certain peace about watching a river just kind of flow along. That's what this new era is going to be like. I will extend peace to her like a river, and the glory of the Gentiles like a flowing stream. Now, I suppose if Isaiah, if he were, teaching, if he was using this language in a teaching situation, I wonder if some of the Jews would have appreciated that language and the glory of the Gentiles.
Well, that's what I was just getting ready to ask you. Is this something he wrote down, or was he standing up somewhere saying this?
Well, Nikki, I don't know. He probably was.
Like, I didn't know if this was a sermon or if this is something.
Well, he probably. This was written by inspiration, but he probably. Don't you suppose he preached? Don't you suppose he preached some of these same things?
Well, because I wondered the same thing, the same question that you just asked, how the Jews felt about him saying that about the Gentiles. That's what made me ask that question.
Yeah. I would guess this, this wasn't written down hidden someplace. This is what Isaiah was all about. And don't you suppose some of those Jews started scratching their head when they talked about the Gentiles?
Well, clearly no one bothered him because this is a really long chapter.
Okay.
I mean, book, a really long book.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I'm sure he said these kind of things to his compatriots. And I imagine, my land, some of them thought, he's siding with the enemy. He's siding with the Gentile world. The people we all hate them all. When the Apostle Paul was caught in the temple and was rescued by and there was a big riot, and when there was a and the Romans rescued him, and he was on the steps of the government building, and he was preaching, and he was going strong in preaching. They were kind of listening, weren't they? According to the record in Acts, they were kind of listening until what time? What did he mention? He mentioned the Gentiles. Man, they couldn't handle that, and they started hooping and hollering and that sort of thing. So, I'm sure that I'm sure that Isaiah's preaching didn't satisfy lots of people, and just like preaching today is not going to satisfy the American culture, is it? I mean, when you start talking about various abortion and same-sex marriage and all of those things, I mean, that gets under the skin of lots of people.
Yeah, I think it's amazing when you read the New Testament how that the apostles didn't understand at first that the Gentiles were going to be part of this church. Peter said on the day of Pentecost that this
and along that line, it was amazing that these Jews were divided into various belief systems where the Sadducees didn't even believe in the resurrection. And the Pharisees had the law of Moses so fouled up that you wouldn't have recognized that it was from the law of Moses, you know. So, they had a, you talk about racist, and talk about this whole thing of hate crimes, you know. Man, these people would have been guilty, you know. Even some of the, and you could imagine some of the discussions of the early Christian community about, you can just imagine some of the Jews thinking, how are we going to accept those Gentiles? And then so some of them started saying, well, I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll make them conform to the law of Moses with regard to circumcision and some other things like that, you see. And then we'll accept them. If they accept Judaism, you know, so to some extent, then we'll accept them as part of the body. Harold, looked like you had something to say. Pardon me? Okay. Continuing there, in verse, middle of verse 12, let's read the whole thing again. For thus saith the Lord, behold, I will extend peace to her like a river, and the glory of the Gentiles like a flowing stream. Then shall ye suck, ye shall be borne upon her sides, and be, the King James Version says, you'll be dandled like upon her knees, D-A-N-D-L-E-D, dandled on her knees. That idea of being born upon her sides. What's that about? You ever see a mother carry their child on their hip? Is that the way you do it, Rachel? Used to. And he's just describing a motherly, a wholesome family situation. That's the kind of Israel it's going to be. And it can't be, it couldn't reference the Jews, the Jewish nation. This could not reference the Jewish nation. Why? They were going to be carried off into Babylon. Going to come back to a ruined mess. And then for the next 400 years, no sovereignty. They wouldn't even have a sovereign nation. And at the time of Christ, they were in bondage to the Roman Empire. So he's just describing a loving. Now, when you think about that, then you need to think on a congregational level. You really need to think about everybody getting along. And no splits over personalities. No splits over somebody wanting to introduce a different doctrine. It ought to be, a congregation ought to be portrayed, painted as a what? It's like a flowing river, peaceful. And of course here he's talking about, in this new regime, it's not going to be a military. It's not going to be a military sort of thing. It's not going to be a kingdom of this world where kings fight and where there's military action. Think of our world today. on a secular level. Think of the many skirmishes we've got going on all over the world. That I'm talking about our country, our nation, and that. Now, do we, as a member of the kingdom, do we have any animosity toward our Russian brethren? Our brethren in the Middle East? Do we have any animosity? Obviously not. I mean, this kingdom is not of this world where there's conflict and fighting, you see. I'm sure we pray for our mission efforts, and our mission efforts that we have some part in, like when Daddy Landon and when he in the Russian area. We don't have any animosity toward it. I mean, it's nothing but a peaceful relationship. Well, that's the way the kingdom is supposed to be, it says here. As one, at verse 13, as one whom his mother comforteth, so will I comfort you. See, he's using all this language that they'd identify with. And so, as a mother comforteth her children and nourishes them and takes care of them, I will comfort you, and ye shall be comforted in Jerusalem. And when you see this, your heart shall rejoice, and your bones shall flourish like a herb, or some versions, a tender grass. The hand of the Lord shall be known toward his servants, and his indignation toward his enemies. Okay. Now we go into a different scene here now, a different narrative. Just the opposite for those that are rebellious. The Lord shall be known toward his servants as a comforter, but his indignation toward his enemies. For behold, the Lord will come with fire. With fire. Not a good thing. With his chariots, like whirlwind. Now he's this metaphorical language here, fire and with whirlwinds. Now, those fire and whirlwinds or tornadoes or hurricanes all portray destruction, right? This is his destruction. To render his anger with fury and his rebuke with flames of fire. Now, this flames of fire describes the world of those that are in rebellion or will be placed. Those persons who rebel against God will be subject to this sort of punishment. Verse 16, for fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh. Now, here he must be relating to the final judgment. When he says all flesh, all would seem to mean all of the peoples that have been in rebellion to him. And the slain of the Lord shall be many. Verse 17, they that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst. Now, What's he talking about there?
Mine says after an idol.
Paganism. Idol. The idolaters, those that eat swine's flesh, obviously a prohibition in the law of Moses. They're those that defy the law of Moses, those that were defying the law of Moses, and the abomination and the mouse. Now, that and the mouse. Do any other versions have a different term for mouse here? In the 17th verse, I have no idea what that mouse is about. Anybody have any idea about what that mouse is about?
There was some type of pagan, like it was unclean according to Leviticus, but it was also an idol in some type of a heathen worship.
Yeah.
ESV has mouse or mice still.
Yeah.
It was unclean and it was an idol.
The Philistines had some kind of a mouse worship. Remember when the Ark of the Covenant was in the possession of the Philistines, and they decided, how do we appease this God of the Hebrews? And they said, well, let's fashion some gold and some mice. So I guess it has something to do with idolatrous worship. Any other ideas on that? Well, God wasn't very happy with that. Defying the law of Moses, going into idolatry, but they shall all be consumed together, saith the Lord. For I know their works and their thoughts. That goes without being stated, doesn't it? God would know. But he says, I know, for I know their works and their thoughts. And it shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. Now, that has a reference, at least it appears to have a reference to the judgment. Because he's going to talk about all nations. And I will set a sign among them. I will set a sign among them. And I will send those that escape of them unto the nations. And I will set a sign unto them. What do you suppose that sign is? Jesus said, when the Jews pressed him for a sign, what did he say? Be the sign of what? Jonah. Okay? I don't know whether that's I don't know whether that the Christ would be the sign, or could it be the destruction of Jerusalem? Could that be the sign that was given? Because the language here says that and I will send those that escape of them unto the nations. The Christian community in Jerusalem that escaped the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, did they go someplace and form a community out in the desert? What'd they do? Pardon me? They went across the globe. They went across the known world, didn't they not? So, is that the sign he is talking about? That may well be, because he says that they'd go to Tarsus. Now, Tarsus may have been in Spain. Paul longed to go to Spain. To Pol and Lud, they may draw the boat into the bow, to Tubal and to Javan and to the isles afar off, that they have not heard of my fame. Now, so this would seem that, that the names of these places, most of them, or a couple of them are not even known, would represent the nations, would represent the whole body of the people of that particular area of the world, into the isles or the coasts, the peoples that are far off, that have not heard of my fame, neither have seen my glory. Now, when in Paul's missionary journeys, when he went into Ephesus, or went into Corinth, or went into wherever, he spoke to the Jews and gave them the opportunity, in the synagogues to hear the gospel. What about the general population of Ephesus, the non-Jewish population? Did they have any? Is there any indication that they had any sense of the God of heaven? Is there any indication that they had any view whatsoever of the God of heaven? When the Apostle Paul was in Athens, in Mars Hill, and he spoke to those people there, did they have any sense of who God is? I don't think so, did they? The point being that here these people that had no sense of God and the glorious nature of God, they heard, some of them heard and believed, right? And as it says here, they understood the glory. The Gentiles understood God's glory. Isn't that amazing? Now think of it. Isn't it amazing that Paul and others could preach to a group of people that had no concept of the God of heaven, and they believed? Now, when you guys go to Costa Rica, most of the people there have some sense of God, don't they? Or when you go to wherever we send missionaries, they have some sense of God, some concept of God. But here, among the Ephesians, think of the Diana of the Ephesians, the big temple of women of ill repute. I mean, they had no concept of God. But they believed, some of them, and God would be glorified by their.
Bill, when Paul went to Antioch of Pisidia, he preached there and said that the whole, in Acts 13, said the whole city came out, the Gentiles. And he was there, and the next week they wanted to hear him again. But when the Jews heard this, they became jealous. And Paul says, since you judged yourself unworthy of eternal life, we
next verse here, he says, and he's talking about the Gentiles, and they shall bring all your brethren, for an offering unto the Lord out of all nations, upon horses and in chariots and in litters and upon mules and upon swift beasts, to my holy mountain Jerusalem. Now, he's not talking about a big caravans coming into the real estate of Jerusalem. He's talking about people coming into the spiritual Israel, the church, becoming Christian. So they're going to come. They're going to come by a mule. They're going to come by metaphorically. They're going to come by mule. They're going to come by horses. Their chariots, swift beasts. They're going to come into the mountain of Jerusalem, unto the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord. Now, isn't that interesting? People are going to come in essentially come in droves. Talking about the Gentile world. In that idea of being an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord, that has the idea that they're going to come in and be clean. And I will also take of them for priests and for Levites, saith the Lord. Of the Gentiles, we're going to have priests and Levites. Now, figure that one out. Under the law of Moses, who could be a priest? Pardon me? And not only of the tribe of Levites, but the family of Aaron. And that lineage came down through. Now, in northern Israel, that crazy Jeroboam, when they split off, he made priest of of awful people, But now we're going to have. They're going to be in this. We know about what Peter said about priest and royal nation and so forth. We know what the New Testament says about this, that a priest, we're a holy priesthood, a royal nation. We understand all of that. And he says, wow, we're going to have, these Gentiles are going to be priests. This spiritual Israel is just going to be a lot different than old racial Israel, old real estate Israel, or real estate Jerusalem. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. I will make it remain with me. When did that new heaven, that new earth start? It's already started, right? Is that right? It's not going to be sometime in the future where there's going to be some kind of 1,000-year reign. We're learning about that from Wednesday evenings. It shall come to pass, for it's the new heavens and new earth, which I make shall remain before me, saith the Lord. So shall your seed and your name remain. That idea of your seed and name remain, what's that about? Do Christ followers have a name? Are Christ followers the seed of Abraham? Don't you suppose that has some kind of, don't you suppose there's some connection there? I think there may well be. And it's come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another. Now, this is Jewish language. This language is in the context of a Jewish audience. Okay? He says, and it shall come to pass from one new moon to another, and one Sabbath to another, having to do with the time frame there. Shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And so, the times of the Gentiles coming into this new spiritual Israel was at hand there, is referenced here. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed. Now, here the prophet now is looking forward. It looks to me like the final judgment. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. They're apparently referencing the judgment. Any parting shots? Any final comments? Okay, the doors are open.